49ers have just beat the New Orleans Saints 16-10 in their second preseason game, and we learned a lot about the 49ers. First off, this is the second week in a row that Kyle Shanahan has not called the offensive plays. He handed those duties off to Clay Kubiak, the passing game coordinator. Now, you might be asking, what does this mean? Is this the long-term thing? I don't think so. Could be. He wants to give Clay some experience calling plays, maybe for the future, potential offensive coordinator promotion, maybe for a shot in the future for another team. Who knows? Maybe it's to try to be more of that CEO coach status to see what else is going on in the different aspects of the game. He knows he needs to improve if he wants to get over that Super Bowl hump. And so that was one of the first things we noticed. But let's break down everything that happened. Brock Purdy played a few series this game, but what was quick to notice from everyone was he was running for his life the entire game. Now, it's very important to note that he was missing pretty much every offensive weapon that he had. Christian McCaffrey wasn't playing. Jordan Mason wasn't playing. George Kittle wasn't playing. Brandon Ayuk, of course, is still sitting out waiting a contract. Deebo Samuel wasn't playing. Jawan Jennings wasn't playing. Trent Williams wasn't playing. But Brock Purdy was out there with the worst offensive line in the NFL. We had Jalen Moore starting at left tackle. You have Colton McKivitz, who is just terrible. And the one bright spot, of course, is Dominic Pooney, who seems to have cemented himself as the starting right guard for the 49ers. But let's face it, outside of that, Brock Purdy was running for his life. He was hit 3 times, knocked down twice out of his 6 passing attempts, which means half the time he dropped back, he was either getting hit some way or another or running for his life. And I think what this does is it adds a lot of leverage to Trent Williams, and the 49ers need to just get him back. Now, I anticipate he'll be back this week. He'll probably play next preseason game, a few series, maybe even the first half to kind of get game shape, because he doesn't need a whole training camp. And let's face it, that's really what he's doing. He knows he's going to play. He hates training camp. He's a 14-year vet. Why does he need another training camp? And so the reality is, though, the 49ers need him, and today's outing shows one thing. The 49ers have to cave to whatever Trent Williams is asking because their line is absolutely atrocious. And Trent Williams gets to just point at today's tape and say, look, your franchise quarterback cannot sit in the pocket without me there protecting his blind side. And so, good news for the Niners is that Purdy walked away unscathed, but it was not good news that he was running for his life within the first quarter of the game. And so I think that points to the fact why Purdy's numbers weren't that great. He almost had 1 interception. Again, if we look at the numbers, I believe he was 2 for 6 with 11 yards. Wasn't great, had 1 sack. And so it's one of those things where Trent Williams can point to that during his contract negotiation. Another few things is the 49ers special teams surprisingly looked good today, specifically Presley Harvin. Now, I want to talk about him a little bit, but it was a huge change, a huge shift from week 1 of the preseason where they were just ripped to shreds with the new kickoff rules. And that's been the 49ers' Achilles heel back since when Jim Harbaugh was the coach. And so it's good to see that they showed up this week, and hopefully they can continue and do that 2 weeks in a row. Now let's talk about one of the biggest subjects, Joshua Dobbs. That's right, the longtime veteran who's traveled to almost every single team has seemed to have cemented himself as the new 49ers backup quarterback with just a tremendous showing. Joshua Dobbs was 12 of 21 for 133 yards. He had a rushing touchdown, 3 rushes for 25 yards, and that rushing touchdown came on a 4th down. He had several different plays where he extended it with his legs and just played phenomenally, and turns out he's going to be a great backup for the 49ers, which you need. Brock Purdy, he's been hurt before, and if he goes down, that you have a serviceable backup in Joshua Dobbs. So it seems that he's kind of locked that up. Now we want to see who's going to get that third kind of emergency quarterback role. Is that going to be Tanner Mordecai, who showed up 4 of 6 for 44 yards, or will that potentially be Brandon Allen? I think that's what the third preseason game is going to show. Even though Brock Purdy is going to probably play that first half with the starters, you're probably going to see a little bit more of who's going to make that third role. Is it going to be Brandon Allen or is it going to be Tanner Mordecai? I think already Joshua Dobbs has cemented that number 2 role with today's outing, and I think it's going to be who's going to be that third emergency quarterback. And so that's what we're going to see in week 3. But props to Joshua Dobbs. Just a phenomenal outing by him, and probably one of the most exciting backup quarterbacks to watch. And it's great to see that he's potentially solidified a role here with the 49ers as the backup quarterback. Now, let's jump over to that offensive line. We talked about Dominic Pooney. He seems to have secured that right guard spot, but Colton McKivitz, Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, if you believe that Brock Purdy is your franchise quarterback, you need to do something about the right side of that offensive line. Colton McKivitz, for the second week in a row, has been the weakest link on that starting offensive line, constantly with the pre-snap penalties over and over and over again. Something needs to happen there. He got an extension, but for what? Why? Because you don't want to pay a premier guy to protect your franchise quarterback? Because you don't want to trade for a veteran that's out there? There are plenty of veterans that were on the trade block. But no, you wanted to go with Colton McKivitz at the right tackle position. For the life of me, I don't know why. Maybe that's the position they decided, you know what, we're not going to invest in that position. We're going to just throw somebody in there that's serviceable. That way we have, deniability if for whatever reason, but we want to invest in the skill positions. Well, guess what, Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch? You can't get the ball to your skill position players and continue to get over that Super Bowl hump if you don't address that offensive line. And so Colton McKivitz hopefully can get better. That explains why he played most of the first half, is because he needs to work on his craft. And so outside of Dominic Pooney, again, it was just an atrocious showing by that offensive line. But you know who did show up this week is rookie Jacob Cowing. Jacob Cowing, who's been hurt, and we've been wondering, do we have something in him? Do we not? Showed up today. In fact, Jacob Cowing had one rush for 19 yards with that end around, but he also had 4 receptions for 51 yards with a 38-yard reception from Joshua Dobbs in the right corner. Phenomenal pass, but an even better catch. And so Jacob Cowing, it's great because now it shows, wow, the 49ers really knew what they were doing with that 4th-round pick and picking up Jacob Cowing, because let's face it, the 49ers lack speed at the wide receiver position, and Jacob Cowing brings that. So I'm really excited to kind of see how he's going to shape into this Kyle Shanahan offense and how he's going to kind of integrate him in there, because there's a lot of weapons, but speed is what the 49ers lack, and that's what he brings. So we're excited to see that. We're excited to see, hopefully, Ricky Pearsall in the 3rd preseason game. But if you can get those 2 guys contributing at any factor, that's going to be huge for this 49ers offense, who's already bringing back the majority of its starters. But if you can go ahead and plant in a couple other playmakers, the sky is the limit for this 49ers offense. Now, let's jump over to Ronnie Bell, year 2, and I fear he's probably not going to make the team. With the showing of Jacob Cowing, and Ricky Pearsall is already going to probably make it, Ronnie Bell really needed to have a strong showing this week, and it didn't happen. He's got one more chance next week, but the reality is, if he's not producing on special teams and isn't doing his job as a receiver, even against backups, he's probably going to end up on the chopping block when it comes time after the 3rd preseason game. And so Ronnie Bell, let's see what happens. You got one more week to try to convince Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch that you belong here on the team and you're deserving of a roster spot. Because let's face it, there are a lot of mouths to feed. There are a lot of wide receivers at the skill position that are producing when you're not. And so the reality is, and if you don't have a great showing next week, you're probably not going to make it on this 53-man roster for the 49ers. And lastly, let's get back to Presley Harvin. Presley Harvin's been showing up. He's been inserted, signed to a veteran minimum contract because Mitch Wisnowski's been dealing with some leg pain. And let's just call it as it is. I think the 49ers need to have an honest discussion is, can Presley Harvin be the puncher for the 49ers? Let's go back to Mitch Wisnowski. Everybody loves him, but the reality is he is costing $2.8 million against the cap. Next year it'll be $3 million. The following year will be another $3 million. But Presley Harvin is the veteran minimum at $1 million, 1.055 or something like that. And so the question has to be asked, is it worth trimming some of the fat? Because if you trade Mitch Wisnowski or even cut him, you save $2.2 million off of the cap, and Presley Harvin's already on for $1 million, the veteran minimum. So you're going to save that 2.2, which could maybe go to Brandon Ayuk. Maybe it can be saved for Brock Purdy. Maybe it could be saved for a restructure that needs to happen later on down the road. Maybe Trent Williams, it could get that buffer. So there's a lot of conversations that can be had right now because there's only a $550,000 dead cap hit, but there's a $2.2 million savings, which you're already going to make up for with Presley Harvin making the veteran minimum. And you don't have to worry about the leg strength. We've seen that. You've also seen the pin, I believe it was 3 times inside the 20-yard line, just phenomenal control. He was previously a 7th round pick out of Pittsburgh, and I'd be interested to see how he shows in week 3 of the preseason, because if he shows up again, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan need to have a serious conversation. Is this the route that we want to go? We love Mitch. We love what he's done for the Niners, but the reality is if Presley Harvin can produce like this at a veteran minimum salary, that's the way you got to go, because you got to allocate different ways. You got to ensure that you're still paying your top guys, and $2 million, $2.2 million can go a long way when it comes to the salary cap and paying other guys. So that's what to keep an eye out for. Joshua Dobbs, great showing. You've secured that number 2 spot, but Presley Harvin, let's see if he becomes a topic of discussion in the coming week or so. And who knows, he may have kicked himself in to the 49ers roster. Well, that's all we have for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Ninerology, and we'll catch you next time.